Three of the most powerful auto CEOs in America just left the White House, and the plan they brought with them completely collapsed. Ford, GM, Stellantis. They came to Washington to stop you from fixing your own car, because repair is now one of their biggest money streams. But President Trump just shut it down. Instead, they triggered a presidential memorandum, a wave of federal pardons, and a national conversation that is now impossible to ignore. Here's exactly what happened, and what it means for your wallet starting today. This isn't about oil changes. Let's get one thing straight right now. Right to repair was never about changing your oil. It was never about swapping brake pads in your driveway on a Sunday afternoon. That's what they wanted you to think. The real fight? It's about control. Who controls the software in your vehicle? Who controls the diagnostic data? Who controls who gets to repair the car after you've already paid for it in full? Here's a number that should stop you cold. For every 100 cars sold, only 30 go back to the dealership for service. 70% go somewhere else. Independent shops, national chains, or owners doing it themselves. 70%. That's a massive river of money flowing away from manufacturers, and they want it back. See, most people think dealerships make their money selling new cars. They don't. The real profit engine is what happens after the sale. Service, parts, diagnostics, software updates, warranty work. That's where the margins live. So when 70% of your customers are walking out the door and handing their money to someone else, that's not just annoying. That's an existential threat to the business model. And that's exactly why this fight moved from your driveway to the halls of Congress, and eventually straight into the Oval Office. But to understand how we got there, we need to go back to where it all started. A small state, a big vote, and a result that nobody in the auto industry saw coming. Massachusetts lit the fuse. A few years ago, Massachusetts voters went to the polls and approved right to repair by an overwhelming margin. The message was simple. If you own a vehicle, you decide who fixes it. Your dealer, your local shop, your own two hands, your choice. Most people thought the debate was over. It wasn't. It had just gone underground. Within weeks, lobbyists were already rewriting the conversation, and they were good at it. Almost overnight, the language shifted. Nobody was talking about alternators or spark plugs anymore. Now it was about telematics, vehicle data, cybersecurity, connected cars, software ecosystems. Suddenly, the guy who just wanted to take his truck to his neighborhood mechanic was being told he was a threat to national security. That's not an exaggeration. That was the argument. And here's why that matters. The moment the conversation moved from mechanical repairs to software and data, the playing field tilted dramatically in favor of the manufacturers. Because they own the software. They control the diagnostic tools. They decide who gets access to the telematics flowing from your vehicle every single second it's on the road. Independent repair shops weren't asking for shortcuts. They weren't asking to bypass safety systems. They were asking for access. The same access increasingly required just to diagnose a modern vehicle. But the industry had successfully reframed the debate, and for a while, it worked. The fight moved behind closed doors, into committee rooms, into legislative offices, into meetings most Americans never heard about. Until one bill number started showing up in places it wasn't supposed to. The bill nobody talked about, H.R. 7389. You don't need to memorize that number, but you need to understand what it represented. One of the biggest legislative battles in the right to repair fight wasn't about parts at all. It was about telematics, the wireless data stream constantly flowing between your vehicle and the manufacturer. Every time your car is on the road, it's generating data, location, speed, braking patterns, engine performance, diagnostic codes, and increasingly, that data is what's required to repair modern vehicles properly. Think about that for a second. Your car is generating a constant stream of information about itself, and the manufacturer controls who gets to see it. Independent repair advocates argued that without meaningful access to that data, right to repair becomes almost meaningless as vehicles get more software dependent. You can have all the wrenches in the world, but if you can't access the diagnostic information, you can't fix the car. And that's exactly the position manufacturers wanted to be in. Modern vehicles aren't just mechanical anymore. They're computers on wheels. Every year, more software, more connected services, more subscriptions, more opportunities for manufacturers to stay connected to the vehicle long after it leaves the showroom floor. And here's the part that should make you uncomfortable. 20 years ago, if a manufacturer wanted to control repairs, they controlled the service manual. You just couldn't buy one. Today, they control the software. Tomorrow, they may control access to the vehicle itself. That's not science fiction. That's the direction this was heading. And then 3 CEOs decided to get on a plane to Washington. The CEOs walk into the Oval Office. Ford, GM, Stellantis. 3 of the most powerful executives in the American auto industry walked into the White House with a plan. They were going to convince President Trump to sign their version of right to repair. A version they had shaped. A version that kept control exactly where they wanted it. Photo ops, handshakes, the whole show. Industries meet with lawmakers all the time. That's normal. That's how government works. But this meeting was different because the stakes were different. This wasn't about regulations. This was about ownership. Who controls a vehicle after it's sold? The manufacturer or the person making the monthly payments? And then Ford's CEO Jim Farley said something that detonated across the internet. He argued that consumers shouldn't repair modern vehicles. Safety concerns, cybersecurity risks. The argument sounded polished, rehearsed. The internet was not impressed. Here's the thing. Those concerns aren't completely wrong. Cybersecurity in modern vehicles is a real issue. Nobody wants someone hacking into a connected car. But independent repair shops service millions of vehicles every single day. ASE-certified technicians repair advanced electronics constantly. Fleet operators, municipalities, insurance companies. They all rely on independent repair. They're not asking for shortcuts. They're asking for access. And I think President Trump started asking a very different question than the one the CEOs came prepared to answer. The industry walked in talking about protecting the repair system. The White House started asking about protecting vehicle owners. Those are not the same conversation. And what happened next? Nobody in that room saw it coming. If you're finding this information helpful, please hit like button and subscribe. The White House flips the script. A few days after those meetings, President Trump signed a presidential memorandum titled, "Lowering the Cost of Living by Promoting the Freedom to Fix." Not the version the auto industry wanted, not even close. Most headlines treated it like a routine press release. But if you actually sit down and read it, and I did, there's a lot more happening beneath the surface. First, the memorandum directed the EPA to clarify what repairs Americans can legally perform on their own emission systems without violating federal law. Think about that. The federal government had to clarify what you're allowed to do to a vehicle you already own. That tells you everything about how complicated, or how deliberately complicated, this had become. Second, it directed the EPA to encourage new certification pathways for aftermarket emissions parts. Right now, much of the country effectively runs on California's certification process, CARB, the California Air Resources Board. One state's regulatory framework acting as a bottleneck for the entire nation. When one certification process controls the market, competition drops. When competition drops, prices go up. Consumers lose. Every time. The memorandum called that out directly. But here's the part that really caught my attention. The administration directed the EPA to consider deprioritizing civil enforcement against people who in good faith repair their own vehicles back to their original configuration, or help others do the same. The federal government wasn't talking about making repairs harder. It was talking about making them easier. That was not the outcome the auto industry flew to Washington to create. And then it got even more interesting. The pardons nobody expected. On July 3rd, President Trump issued full pardons to multiple mechanics and individuals who had been convicted of federal emissions-related cases involving vehicle modifications and aftermarket tuning. Let that sink in. People were convicted, federally convicted, for fixing their own cars. Now, those pardons involve specific federal cases. They're separate legal actions from the presidential memorandum. But taken together, they send a message that is impossible to misread. The federal government's approach to vehicle ownership and repair was changing. This wasn't one isolated decision. This was a signal, a very loud one. And suddenly, what had been a niche debate between automakers and independent repair shops became a national conversation, not just for mechanics, not just for car enthusiasts, for anyone who owns a vehicle. Who decides what happens to your car after you buy it? The manufacturer or you? Because here's the reality most people haven't fully processed yet. Nobody buys a $60,000 pickup truck thinking they're purchasing a temporary license to use it. Nobody signs the paperwork on a family SUV believing someone else should ultimately decide where it gets repaired. Consumers believe they're buying property, their property. That's always been the understanding. And that's exactly why this fight is far from over. The bigger picture. What do you actually own? Let's zoom out, because this story is bigger than right to repair, bigger than one presidential memorandum, bigger than 3 CEOs and a White House meeting. This is about the definition of ownership itself. For over 100 years, buying a car meant something simple. You bought it, you drove it, you maintained it, you decided who worked on it. If you wanted to keep it for 20 years, that was your call. If you wanted your neighborhood mechanic, the guy you've trusted for a decade, that was your call too. Nobody questioned it. Today, that relationship is changing. Not because of one law, not because of one company's decision, but because vehicles themselves have fundamentally changed. Your car is now a connected device. It receives over-the-air software updates. It generates data constantly. It communicates with the manufacturer long after it leaves the lot. And there is serious money being made on that data. The same data centers we keep hearing about, collecting, processing, monetizing. None of that is automatically bad. Modern vehicles are genuinely safer. Technology has made repairs more precise. That's real. But control is the issue. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Competition has always been good for consumers. It pushes prices down. It improves service quality. It rewards businesses that earn your trust instead of assuming they have it. Remove meaningful competition from vehicle repair, and consumers always pay more. That's not a theory. That's economics. Independent repair shops have served this country for generations. They've earned their place, and the consumers who rely on them deserve a choice. The question is whether that choice will still exist in 10 years. Where does this go from here? So what happens next? Congress will keep debating right to repair, not just in automotive, but across every industry where software now controls access to products people already own. Courts will keep hearing cases. Manufacturers will keep making their arguments. Independent shops will keep making theirs. And technology isn't slowing down. Every model year, vehicles get more connected, more software dependent, more data generating. The gap between what a manufacturer controls and what an owner controls is widening. Fast. But here's what this week proved. For years, right to repair was treated as a niche issue. Something for gearheads, something for shop owners, something most Americans scrolled past without a second thought. Now it's sitting on the president's desk. That's not a niche issue anymore. The auto industry went to Washington believing it was going to lock in control over the future of vehicle repair. Instead, it may have accelerated the biggest consumer victory in this space in years. And that's the part the media missed entirely. They covered the memorandum. They covered the pardons. They treated them as separate stories. They're not separate. They're the same story. And the story is this. The auto industry picked a fight it thought it could win. It walked into the most powerful office in the world with a plan, and it walked out having triggered the exact opposite of what it came to achieve. But don't be fooled. This fight is far from over. Do you trust manufacturers to do the right thing? Or is this just round one? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share this with every car owner you know, because most people have no idea this is even happening. And if you enjoyed the content, smash that like button and subscribe for more auto content. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.